I'm here with Neta El-Kayem, and she has graciously agreed to let me video her. And I found out about Neta through a very long and detailed interview that a friend sent me. And Neta is an artist, and she is a musician, and she can label or define herself as she wishes for this purposes of this film. But I was very interested in what I read because of her, if I may say, Mizrahi Moroccan Jewish background, and also the business about being the other and being outside, of course, was very interesting. All the different places that you've lived and how you felt about that was fascinating to me. And she's a wonderful singer. So, if I could ask you a couple of questions. So, how recently have you started your singing career?
Wow, really recently. Only during the last year. Like of course, I always sang, and I always had this or that connection to music, but I focused on visual art, and then I like recently find a way to I don't know, find my place in music. I think before I didn't feel really convenience to sing in Hebrew, or maybe I didn't find the style I liked in music. And recently I discovered this music which belongs to the family roots, and it carried me inside.
So you didn't know about that when you were growing up? I remember reading the little story about you singing like Whitney Houston and Rita, but you didn't know about the Moroccan part till recently?
Of course I knew. I grew up in a Jewish Moroccan house. Like we grew up on this music, and we always listened to it in families events, and outside also in large events like Mimuna, which is a Jewish Moroccan celebration every year. And the musicians were everywhere, like but we as young Israelis didn't we didn't feel that it's ours. We grew up in schools on other things, and also when I got to high school I went to music class, and of course I learned the Western music, classical music that came from Europe, of course. And for me it was a music that always existed, but I didn't pay attention to it.
I was very interested in all the different people that influenced you too, because I think you said you had a Russian teacher and an Indian teacher. I mean, you really have had, and then you have your parents who are both from Morocco but different parts, right? Tangier and Casablanca.
Tinghir it's a village, a small.
Say it again. It's
Tinghir.
Tinghir.
Tinghir, it's in the south of Morocco, and it's on Todra Valley, which is when you come to the Sahara. It's really like a heaven, small heaven on earth. But it's a village by all the ways and meanings. Like people live there really symbiotically with the nature, and still wash the clothes in the river, and the house made of mud. And only when I got there I understood a lot of things in my grandmother's behavior. And
was that when you went back? Was that the first time you had been there? So you didn't go as a child? You went?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And the other thing, in the interview you talked a lot about your grandmother, and I was very touched when you said that she was very independent but lonely at the same time. So and
because once
comments.
When you wanted to be independent, you had to be lonely. You had to be lonely because the guys, like they were like another baby in the house. You should take care of them. And recently I had a really nice conversation with a woman that came from the same village of my grandmother, and she told me about that, how hard it was, like for a girl to make her own decisions, to be really free from all these, frames, taking care of the kids, taking care of everyone. Like in a way, when I got to know my grandmother, she was after that. She finished all this hard part of her life, which she needed to take care of all the children, and also she lost children in the war, and it was really a bubble. Her house were like some place between earth and heaven. Like she were already ready to go to she spoke with God, and she had a really relationships with the dead, and with the history and with the future, and she were in between.
And you spoke enough of the language, or you grew up speaking it, so you could converse with her easily. So did you grow up speaking?
It happened the opposite. I remember that I was growing up in Hebrew, and when I came to her house, I told her, Savta, grandma, please don't make efforts to understand me. I want to make the efforts. I'm young. I have time. I can learn your language. I want to make the efforts for you to understand me. So then I started to listen, to imitate the sounds of the words, and everyone knew that they couldn't speak Moroccan language near me because I understand all the gossip. So don't speak to her. She looks very young, but she understands our language. So.
And because you're so musical, I bet your ear is very good about languages. I mean, when did you start learning English? Was that in high school?
Yeah, it was ordinary English classes and English class. No, nothing special.
Yeah.
And also through music.